The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife Sophie on June 28, 1914 in Sarajevo was the catalyst for the First World War. This tragic event marked a turning point in history, setting off a series of events that would lead to one of the deadliest conflicts the world had ever seen. The couple was visiting Sarajevo to inspect Imperial armed forces in Bosnia and Herzegovina, regions annexed by Austria-Hungary in 1908, which had angered Serbian nationalists. The assassination was carried out by Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist associated with the Black Hand, a secret society. The Black Hand was dedicated to the creation of a greater Serbia, and they saw the Archduke as a symbol of oppression. Princip and his co-conspirators had planned the assassination meticulously, believing that the death of the Archduke would further their cause. The assassination was not just an isolated act of violence, but a calculated political statement. Austria-Hungary, outraged by the assassination, held Serbia responsible and issued an ultimatum with deliberately unacceptable demands. The ultimatum was designed to be rejected, giving Austria-Hungary a pretext to declare war. The demands included the suppression of anti-Austrian propaganda and the involvement of Austro-Hungarian officials in the investigation of the assassination. Serbia's partial compliance was not enough to satisfy Austria-Hungary. When Serbia failed to meet all the demands, Austria-Hungary declared war on July 28, 1914, setting off a chain reaction across Europe. The declaration of war was the first domino to fall in a series of events that would engulf the continent. The news spread quickly, and within days, other nations began to mobilize their forces, preparing for the inevitable conflict. This seemingly isolated event quickly escalated into a global conflict due to a complex web of alliances that entangled the major European powers. The alliances were meant to provide security, but they instead created a situation where a conflict between two countries could draw in many others. The Triple Alliance of Germany, Austria-Hungary and Italy faced off against the Triple Entente of France, Russia and Great Britain. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, declared war on Russia, which was backing Serbia. The German military strategy, known as the Schlieffen Plan, called for a quick victory over France before turning to the Eastern Front to face Russia. This plan required the rapid mobilization of troops and a swift, decisive attack. Germany then declared war on France, allied with Russia. The declaration of war on France was part of Germany's broader strategy to avoid a two-front war. The German High Command believed that by quickly defeating France, they could then focus their efforts on Russia, which was slower to mobilize. Germany's invasion of Belgium, a neutral country to attack France, prompted Great Britain to declare war on Germany. The violation of Belgian neutrality was a key factor in Britain's decision to enter the war. Britain had guaranteed Belgium's neutrality through the Treaty of London, and the invasion was seen as a blatant disregard for international agreements. Within a month, most of Europe was at war. The conflict quickly spread beyond Europe, drawing in colonies and territories from around the world. The war became a truly global conflict, with battles fought in Africa, Asia and the Middle East. The scale and scope of the war were unprecedented, affecting millions of people across the globe. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the spark that ignited the powder keg of European tensions. But the underlying causes of the war were far more complex. The tensions had been building for years, with various nations vying for power and influence. The assassination was simply the final straw that set off the explosion. Nationalism, imperialism, militarism, and a complex system of alliances had been building up for decades, creating an environment ripe for conflict. Nationalist fervour had led to a sense of competition and mistrust among nations. Imperial ambitions had created rivalries over colonies and resources. Militarism had led to an arms race, with nations building up their military capabilities in preparation for war. The assassination provided the excuse, the trigger, for these underlying tensions to erupt into a global war. The world would never be the same again, as the war reshaped borders, societies, and the course of history. The legacy of the First World War continues to be felt to this day, reminding us of the devastating consequences of conflict and the importance of striving for peace. The pre-war alliances played a crucial role in escalating the conflict from a regional crisis into a global war. These alliances, formed with the intention of creating a balance of power, instead created a fragile web of loyalties that could easily be shattered. The two main alliances were the Triple Alliance, consisting of Germany, Austria-Hungary and Italy. This alliance was primarily defensive, aimed at protecting the member nations from external threats and ensuring mutual support in case of an attack. On the other side was the Triple Entente, comprising France, Russia and Great Britain. Unlike the Triple Alliance, the Triple Entente was more of an understanding than a formal alliance, but it still committed the nations to support each other in the face of aggression. These alliances, formed in the decades leading up to the war, were meant to deter aggression and maintain a balance of power. Diplomats and leaders believed that the threat of collective retaliation would prevent any single nation from acting aggressively. However, they also created a dangerous situation where an attack on one country could quickly draw in its allies. This interconnectedness meant that a conflict between two nations could rapidly escalate into a full-scale war involving multiple countries. When Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, it triggered a domino effect. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand by a Serbian nationalist was the spark that ignited the powder keg of alliances. Russia, bound by its alliance with Serbia, began mobilizing its army. The Russian Empire saw itself as the protector of Slavic nations and felt compelled to support Serbia against Austro-Hungarian aggression. This mobilization prompted Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, to declare war on Russia. Germany, fearing a two-front war, decided to act swiftly to neutralize the Russian threat. Germany's war plans, designed to fight a two-front war against France and Russia, involved a rapid attack on France through neutral Belgium. The Schlieffen Plan aimed to quickly defeat France before turning east to face Russia. This violation of Belgian neutrality brought Great Britain, allied with France and Belgium, into the war. Britain had guaranteed Belgium's neutrality and felt obligated to defend it against German aggression. Within days, the complex system of alliances had plunged Europe into a continent-wide war. What began as a regional conflict between Austria-Hungary and Serbia quickly escalated into a global conflagration, drawing in nations from across the world and setting the stage for one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. The Western Front, stretching over 400 miles from the North Sea to the Swiss border, became the main theatre of war in Western Europe. This vast expanse of land saw some of the most intense and grueling battles of World War I, where millions of soldiers from various nations fought and died. The landscape, once peaceful and serene, was transformed into a hellish expanse of mud, barbed wire and craters from relentless artillery bombardments. It was characterized by trench warfare, a brutal and static form of combat, where both sides dug extensive trenches protected by barbed wire, machine guns and artillery. These trenches stretched for miles and were often only a few hundred yards apart, creating a deadly stalemate. Soldiers lived, fought and died in these trenches, enduring unimaginable hardships and constant danger. The Battle of the Marne in September 1914 marked the end of mobile warfare on the Western Front and the beginning of trench warfare. This pivotal battle saw the Allies successfully halt the German advance, forcing both sides to dig in and fortify their positions. The shift from rapid movement to entrenched positions set the stage for the grueling and protracted conflict that would define the Western Front. The German advance was halted by a combination of French and British forces, and both sides dug in, creating the elaborate trench systems that would define the Western Front for the next 4 years. These trenches were not just simple ditches, they were complex networks with front-line support and reserve trenches connected by communication trenches. Soldiers spent weeks or even months in these trenches, facing the constant threat of enemy attacks and the harsh realities of trench life. Life in the trenches was a horrific experience for soldiers on both sides. They lived in cramped, unsanitary conditions with little protection from the elements. The constant presence of death and the fear of the next attack weighed heavily on their minds. Despite the hardships, soldiers formed strong bonds with their comrades, finding moments of camaraderie and even humor amidst the chaos. They endured constant shelling, machine gun fire, and the threat of sniper attacks. The sound of artillery barrages was a constant backdrop, and the fear of being hit by a sniper's bullet was ever present. The psychological toll of this relentless warfare was immense, leading to what was then known as shell shock, now recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. The trenches themselves were muddy, rat-infested, and prone to disease. Soldiers often stood in waterlogged trenches for days, leading to trench foot, a painful condition caused by prolonged exposure to damp and unsanitary conditions. Rats, attracted by the abundance of food and corpses, were a constant nuisance, spreading disease and adding to the soldiers' misery. Attacks across no man's land, the area between the opposing trenches, often resulted in heavy casualties for little or no territorial gain. This barren, cratered landscape was a deadly no man's land, where soldiers faced barbed wire, machine gun fire, and artillery shells. Despite the high cost, these attacks were a grim necessity, as both sides sought to break the stalemate and gain an advantage. The bravery and sacrifice of those who fought on the Western Front remain a poignant reminder of the horrors of war. World War I witnessed the introduction of new technologies that revolutionized warfare and increased its destructiveness. Machine guns, capable of firing hundreds of rounds per minute, made it extremely difficult to attack across open ground. Artillery, including heavy guns capable of firing shells over long distances, became a dominant force on the battlefield, inflicting heavy casualties and devastating the landscape. The tank, a British invention first used in battle in 1916, was designed to break the stalemate of trench warfare. Early tanks were slow and unreliable, but they showed the potential of armoured vehicles to overcome trench defences. Airplanes, also in their infancy at the beginning of the war, were initially used for reconnaissance, but quickly evolved into weapons of war. Pilots engaged in dogfights, and airplanes were armed with machine guns and bombs, ushering in a new era of aerial warfare. Chemical weapons such as chlorine and mustard gas were introduced with devastating effects, causing widespread casualties and long-term suffering.